everyone. My name is Judy Vorndran with TaxOps SALTovation.com. Alex and I were just chatting about another issue in the city of Chicago and the Wayfair Nexus thresholds and some of the challenges with the prior physical presence issues and so forth. But as we were chatting, we started to just sort of talk about why is it that this isn't a priority for taxpayers or even an understanding for CFOs and controllers, business people. There's just such a challenge in our nation about understanding the importance of getting your arms around your state and local tax issues. And Wayfair has certainly risen a lot of that to prominence. But what has happened is we have these conversations with our clients about Wayfair being the driver for compliance. We end up finding they already had Nexus for some other reason, because why would they otherwise have had business in the state that was out of their domicile? So you're at a state like Illinois, and then all of a sudden you find you have customers in California and Texas and Oklahoma or Vermont. I mean, you just could sell anywhere to anyone because your product can get to market via Amazon. If you're selling a thing or your software, anybody with Wi-Fi can access it. So it's what I find very interesting is how easy it is for businesses to tax customers out of state, but how little regard is given to the sourcing of the revenue, the understanding of the business footprint, and whether or not how they got that customer in that jurisdiction. And then, of course, Wayfair has said we should pay attention to this because we've sold an economic amount of stuff into a state. But when we start talking to them, we find out they've already been in the state because they already built a market because they could. So what do you think, Alex? Why do you think it is in our field that we struggle so much with educating people about how to pick tax advisors that specialize in our space?
Judy, honestly, I wish I had a great answer. I don't. I've been ruminating on this, I think, possibly my entire career. I think before I say anything else, I do want to qualify something, or at least my viewpoint. I think, we're in this specific industry, right? So we are intimately aware of what's going on with our industry, and we have to acknowledge that CFOs and VPs of tax and other business leaders and entrepreneurs are dealing with a much larger pool of responsibility, so to speak, right? Where we're just one small little element of the entire pie for them. But where I think, an important one, because getting taxes wrong, maybe not immediately, but ultimately bites you in the rear end, and it's typically an expensive bite, which is why we're squeaking so loud and trying to help as many taxpayers as we can avoid that bite by being proactive. So having said that, I don't know why there's such misapprehension as far as professional services go, and I think that probably extends to other industries as well. But the old saying, you think it's expensive to hire a professional, wait until you hire an amateur, kind of comes to mind. I think expertise is expensive, and I would always be careful of hiring the lowest bidder, right? Our approach is always holistic. Nothing in the state tax field really happens in a vacuum. So when you're talking to a provider who is an expert in sales tax only, you might be making sales tax decisions or decisions for sales tax that are affecting your state income tax position, or affecting credits, or affecting payroll, or vice versa. Payroll is affecting sales tax, yep. Or income tax is affecting sales tax, or payroll is affecting unclaimed property, right? Yeah. I mean, there's a web that is weaved between each one of these sub tax types that all fall under the state tax category. Yep. And if a provider isn't well versed in each one of those, then you may be getting good advice for one of the subtypes, but not really considering the ramifications of another. So that's just a few kind of off the top of my head thoughts. I don't know.
Yeah, and I think it's been interesting how with in my experience working at the largest firms of the world, like I worked at Deloitte and PricewaterhouseCoopers, as did you work at a big large firm, and so we're working with giant multinational Fortune 500, and then all kinds of different in between. But there is this market of understanding. They might even have an entire group of people like us at their firm, at their
Mhm.
company, and we're working in conjunction with because they can only handle so much volume. There's so much volume running through the business of information that they can only handle certain pieces of it and they need that extra help. But then there's companies that have nobody who does this at all. Maybe they have a bookkeeper or a controller, maybe not even a CFO. So there's a level of excellence and competency and so many hats being put upon the in-house accounting, bookkeeping staff, APAR, and whether or not you have enough to kind of really manage your outputs and your reconciliations and your financial accounting. Adding tax onto that is just a layer that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah,
So I think there's that. And then they don't really know how to buy those services, right? Or they think, like you said, I've got this problem in sales tax, or I need to get a payroll registration. The payroll provider sets up the payroll account, and then they don't look at the sales tax. Nobody looks at it. It's on the same bloody form, but they don't even
right,
think about it. And at the same time, they could have got things set up. They didn't. But of course, even if they did, they'd have to file returns and they're not ready to file returns. So
right.
thankfully we see automation out there with more providers and connecting to more systems, but even that has been sort of oversold and underdelivered where it's like we've got the connector, but it's not just a plug and play because it's your
No,
unique business and you've got to really understand that to set it up well. And you've been busy getting your product to market and just making sure you get orders and have a business, then your success is the problem, right? Because then it's hard to actually put something in lockstep with that. So
yeah,
I mean, I just think it's, but I also wonder if it's just like a culture of avoidance, or I always hate for enforcement to be the driver of compliance, but it's sort of a push pull of like if you're successful, you comply, but it still takes time because you can't do it right away, or you get in trouble, and then that's how you comply. So I just
yeah,
think it's interesting that there is this slicing and dicing in our nation of different expertise in the tax community that everybody thinks what that one person can do it all. They can't, and you, like you said, you've got to get expertise. I don't know. It's just something where we continue to be. Continue to be a little kerfuffled is my new term, my new word about that. I try to educate people about the why it
yeah,
matters, and then sometimes they hear it, and sometimes they just don't want to listen right now. And I hate for that to be the listen me, you're going to have a giant assessment. And we have a client right now with a very large audit assessment in one jurisdiction. I mean, that's sort of heartbreaking to me because the tax should have been collected from the customer and they should know it, but they're going to owe it. And they could go back and recoup it if they wanted, but they probably won't.
yeah,
So now you've just added like a head count that didn't get you ahead. It just paid the government tax you didn't get right. But the money is real, but somehow there isn't a belief that it is. So I think
yeah.
that's an interesting issue too.
It is, and and I've heard several times before where where um, uh, an entrepreneur has said in response to our fair warnings, is well, you're just using a stick, this the stick methodology to scare me into buying services. And I really don't like that, because that's not what
Yeah,
we're trying to do. I mean,
correct.
we hold ourselves to a higher standard. We're professionals. We've been doing this a long time, and we've seen plenty of audit enforcement um, in our careers, that have led to large assessments. And we're trying to act in your best interest. We're not trying to sell you services that you don't need.
Correct.
Um, in this particular case that comes to mind, they had a local provider who was doing their state income tax compliance, and this provider said, in response to that, well, we've never had an audit before. And I'm not sure what that meant. If they meant that as a firm, none of their clients have ever been audited, or this company has never been audited and they've never defended it. And that might be true, unlikely, but true. But that doesn't mean that there aren't audits. There are,
Correct.
where I personally have 6 of them that I'm defending right now. They happen.
Yeah.
Um, we've had a little bit of a lull, I think, in the last 3 years since Wayfair, at least on the sales tax side. But
Yep.
but we're at that 3-year mark, and they're going to start coming now, especially after COVID is kind of, workplaces are starting to return to whatever normal is now. But we're stabilizing, and I think the audits are going to start picking up, and we're seeing that. So it's just it's interesting. I was a little taken aback by that comment. We're not here to upsell you anything. We're here to get your back.
Yeah. Well, and not only that, but just because you haven't been audited means you don't have to comply. Like, you're supposed to comply. Like, that's what it's expected. We have a voluntary system. So why am I convincing you to follow what the law requires? So yeah, it's sort of it's interesting in different cultures. We have clients in the UK, we have clients in Spain, whatever. We have different country cultures, and some of those cultures are much more compliant and they take it very seriously as an owner and so forth, that they want to comply as fully as possible. Now, you can never comply 100%. That's just not, unfortunately, just the way business operates. You can't always get it exactly right, but you can get pretty darn close. But then there's this other side of like non-compliance. It's very interesting to me. And we sort of have a structure or a nature in America that we don't like paying taxes, which I appreciate. And like, nobody wants to pay more than their fair share, but what is a fair share?
And they should, yeah.
So I think that is and clearly,
and that's what we're here for,
money.
is to make sure that you don't.
Yeah, good point. And then it's mindful and well thought through, and that the government, when asked, you're going to say to them, yes, we thought about this. This is what the law says. This is what we're doing, and this is how we're applying it. I think that's a fair standard to you, and you're getting your fair share. Yeah. Anyway, that's just something I've been really pondering about, and why I want to educate people about how important it is to pick a good provider and to understand their expertise and not just their sales pitch, right? To really vet them. But if you don't know what you don't know, then how do you know if they're a good provider, right?
Yeah.
If you don't know how many clients they've helped, how long they practiced in their area, what their experience has been, it's important to see that and decide if that's the right provider for you. And there's a lot of people getting in this game now, especially with Wayfair, that are sort of maybe not completely qualified to handle all the pieces that you might need. And it's important to vet that so you can get the right set of people. Like, no lawyer, we're both lawyers, and no lawyer, like my husband's a securities lawyer. Like, he doesn't do employment law. He doesn't set up contracts. He doesn't do landlord tenant, right?
Mm-hmm.
He just doesn't. He would never even touch that area. He has enough knowledge to know how to research it because he's a lawyer, but he practices in an area that has expertise. And there's something about our CPA community where we're a little too general, but you've got audits, you've got tax, you've got IT, you've got billing, AR, financial accounting, you've got GAAP, you've got tax. I mean, it's not all the same animal. So it's important to kind of assimilate a group of providers that can really give you best practices in lots of different areas. And that's kind of what we try to do here at TaxOps.
That's right. Absolutely. We'll keep fighting a good fight.
I know, right? All right. Thanks for taking your time to listen. If you guys want to hear any more from us, check out saltovation.com.